The Roman Rite of the Templar Order, also known as the Italian Rite of the Templar Order, is one of the oldest rites of the Templar Order in operation in Italy from the time of ancient Rome through the Renaissance era and into the present day. During the Renaissance, the Templars' goals of peace and order were corrupted by two grand masters from the house of Borgia, Rodrigo and Cesare, who instead sought power and domination at all costs. Modern Templars view the Borgias as debauched tyrants who corrupted the order's goals for their personal gain and consider their reign to be a holy age of the order. In 1476, Ezio Auditore da Firenze, an Italian assassin, killed Vittorio della Rovere, the previous Grand Master of the Templar Order, and stole the Apple of Eden hidden within the Vatican. Ezio, now wanted by the entire Roman Rite of the Templars, fled to Rome where he met with Rodrigo Borgia, the current Grand Master. Unknown to Ezio, Rodrigo was secretly the infamous Pope Alexander VI, who had a long-standing rivalry with the Assassin's Order since its inception. One night, Ezio snuck into the Vatican to retrieve the apple from Rodrigo, but was captured by the pontiff and brought before him. Rodrigo demanded the return of the apple, but Ezio refused until Rodrigo revealed his secret identity as the Grand Master, telling him that the Templars would never get the apple back if he was killed. Seeing no other choice, Ezio escaped, leaving the apple behind. Rodrigo, however, discovered that the apple had been copied and the copy given to Ezio. Fearing that the assassin would now seek out his allies, Rodrigo ordered his men to kill the Spanish Inquisitor General Tomás de Torquemada, who was in Rome to investigate the heretical teachings of the Florentine philosopher Marsilio Ficino. However, the plan failed and Torquemada survived, but not before Rodrigo had poisoned him and removed his memories. Rodrigo then sent assassins to kill the man who had copied the apple for Ezio. But once more his plan failed. Years later, after much searching, Rodrigo finally learned that the Assassins' Guild had taken shelter inside the Medici Bank in Florence and decided to send his nephew Cesare Borgia to seize the bank and find the apple. The two assassins guarding the apple, Bartolomeo and Vieri Auditore, were childhood friends of Ezio, who had sent them to protect the artifact. However, Cesare infiltrated the Medici Bank undetected, ambushed the two assassins, and took the apple. Cesare then went to tell his uncle about his victory, but Rodrigo was furious, saying that the apple was needed to bring balance to the world, not to be seized for the Templars. He took the apple and locked it away in the Vatican once more, this time stealing Cesare's memories of retrieving it. To stop any future attempts by the assassins, Rodrigo dispatched a group of men to assassinate Ezio. They failed and instead freed one of Ezio's friends, Niccolo di Niccoli, who had been imprisoned for heresy. Later, when Ezio and Niccolo traveled to the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore to retrieve fragments of Altair's lost journal, Rodrigo followed them to Florence and placed a curse on the city, turning it into a stagnant swamp filled with disease and war. Wanting to lift the curse, Ezio and Niccolo searched the cathedral for the lost pieces of Altair's journal, which when put together revealed the name Cristofle Colombo. Knowing that this name held the key to ending the curse, Ezio traveled to the Spanish capital of Granada and found the man himself, a sailor who believed he could reach Asia by traveling west across the ocean. Agreeing to help him, Ezio funded and joined Cristofle's voyage aboard the Santa Maria, where the assassin recovered the apple from Cesare, who had stolen it from Rodrigo. Ezio then gave the apple to Cristofle, who used it to calm a storm that threatened to sink the ship. Upon reaching land, Cristofle abandoned the assassin and claimed the land for Spain. Ezio, finding the local natives friendly, helped them build better homes and tools, earning their trust and love. When Cristofle returned with armed men to claim the island, Ezio used his influence over the locals to lead them in a successful revolt against the conquistador, forcing him to flee. In 1492, Rodrigo Borgia was elected pope, and became known as Pope Alexander VI. Through his new position, the Templars gained immense wealth, power, and influence, moving their headquarters to Rome. In the latter half of the decade, Rodrigo learned that the apple had come into the possession of the monk Girolamo Savonarola, who used it to remove the Medici family from power and become the de facto ruler of Florence. Seeking to recover the artifact, the Templars sent continuous waves of soldiers to Florence. However, the bodies kept being sent back, and the Templars were disappointed when Savonarola was ultimately overthrown and executed before they had the chance to retrieve the apple. In 1493, Rodrigo also learned of the existence of a mysterious staff used by the first bishop of Rome, which was hidden deep within the Vatican. Planning to use it to further his own power, the Pope tasked the assassin killer, Antonio de' Pazzi, with retrieving it. But Pazzi was ultimately unsuccessful, returning to the Pope empty-handed. On 11th August 1492, Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI after having bribed most of the cardinals. The Templars became the most powerful force in Europe and based their headquarters in Rome. As the Pope, Rodrigo also gained access to the papal staff, which was in reality an Ezio artifact and the second piece of Eden required to open the Vatican vault. Sometime later, Rodrigo learned that the apple had come into the possession of the monk Girolamo Savonarola, who used it to remove the Medici family from power and become the de facto ruler of Florence. Seeking to recover the artifact, the Templars sent continuous waves of soldiers to Florence. However, the bodies kept being sent back, and the Templars were disappointed when Savonarola was ultimately overthrown and executed before they had the chance to retrieve the apple. On 28 December 1499, the leading assassins in Italy traveled to Rome to assassinate Rodrigo and prevent him from accessing the Vatican vault. While his allies distracted the Borgia guards in the city, Ezio traveled along the Passetto di Borgo to the Basilica di San Pietro. Once inside the Sistine Chapel, the assassin lunged at Rodrigo while he was proclaiming the Nicene Creed in Latin to the congregation. However, Ezio briefly hesitated to take his target's life, allowing Rodrigo to recover and shoved the assassin away. The Grand Master then used the papal staff to bless his entire congregation. Ezio revealed that he had brought the apple with him, using it to summon 4 illusionary clones of himself to assist in his battle against Rodrigo. Despite this, the Grand Master ultimately emerged victorious and took the apple from Ezio, whom he left for dead after stabbing him in the abdomen. With both pieces of Eden in hand, Rodrigo entered the vault, but was unable to access the main chamber, as only the prophet of God could do so. The Grand Master was soon confronted by Ezio again, who had survived his stab wound and demanded to settle matters between them in a sword fight. Ezio insulted Rodrigo, but despite being empowered by the papal staff, he was ultimately no match for the older and stronger Rodrigo. Dying to his fate, Ezio Auditore demanded that the Templar end his life quickly, but was surprised when Rodrigo decided to mercy kill Ezio instead. He then watched as Rodrigo used the pieces of Eden to open the door to the vault, confirming that the Templar was the true prophet all along. Rodrigo left the vault and went to the Sistine Chapel and said, "The heretic assassin is dead." And the priests, monks, and nuns and cardinals rejoiced over Ezio Auditore's death and threw Ezio's dead corpse into the Tiber River. And Rodrigo Borgia and the congregation set up a funeral mass for the Italian deceased Templars that were killed by the assassin for being a Catholic and a Templar. The priests of the church gave the deceased Italian Templars their last rites, and the Italian Templars were released from purgatory and ascended into heaven with Jesus Christ. The end.